There are moments in life when we stop and ask ourselves, what am I really doing here? Why do I feel so conflicted inside, torn between what I want and what I think I should be? Why, even after all the progress, education, and comfort, do I still feel restless? These questions, raw and universal, are where the teachings of Jiddu Krishnamurti begin. Krishnamurti wasn't a preacher, nor did he claim to be a guru. He was a mirror, a voice that reflected back to humanity its deepest illusions and fears, showing us the root of our suffering, the self that never stops seeking, comparing, fearing, and controlling. Born in 1895 in colonial India, Jiddu Krishnamurti's life story reads like a paradox. Discovered as a young boy by the Theosophical Society, he was proclaimed the world teacher, a messianic figure meant to lead humanity into a new spiritual age. For years, he was trained, protected, and worshipped as a kind of chosen one. But what Krishnamurti did next changed everything. In 1929, standing before thousands of followers who waited for him to assume his divine role, he dissolved the Order of the Star, the very organization built around him, declaring, "Truth is a pathless land." With those words, he freed himself and invited others to do the same. He rejected all authority, all spiritual hierarchies, all systems that claimed to lead to enlightenment. The revolution he spoke of wasn't political, religious, or social, it was inward. Krishnamurti's central insight was piercingly simple: the self is the source of our conflict. The I, the ego that clings to identity, belief, and memory, creates division both within and outside us. It divides you from me, success from failure, heaven from hell. He said that as long as we identify with thought, as long as we say, "I am my opinions," or "I am my story," we remain imprisoned. For him, freedom wasn't about achieving something new. It was about seeing, directly and deeply, the chains that bind us. He often spoke about the mechanics of thought. Thought, he said, is old. It's memory, knowledge, experience, the past trying to shape the present. And because thought is limited, everything born from it, our beliefs, systems, ideologies, is also limited. The tragedy of humanity is that we try to solve our inner problems with thought, not realizing that thought itself is the problem. You can't end fear through analysis. You can't find love through discipline. You can't reach peace through struggle. Awareness, silent, choiceless observation, is the only real transformation. Krishnamurti's idea of awareness wasn't mystical. It was radical clarity. He urged people to look at themselves without condemnation or justification, to simply see. When you watch your anger, he said, don't name it, don't say it's good or bad, don't resist or escape it. Just observe. In that pure observation, without the observer, the anger dissolves. The observer, the one who judges, interprets, or compares, is actually the past looking at the present. But when the past stops interfering, what remains is pure attention. And in that attention, the division between observer and observed disappears. That is freedom. He often used nature as a metaphor for this state of awareness. Look at a tree, he would say, without naming it. Don't call it a tree, don't categorize it as beautiful or ugly. Just see it as it is, in its living reality. In that moment, perception is direct, unfiltered, whole. The same applies to looking at yourself. When you stop labeling, you begin to see. And seeing is transformation. You don't have to make an effort to change, insight itself changes everything. For Krishnamurti, freedom wasn't the opposite of control, it was the absence of psychological bondage altogether. He saw that people everywhere were seeking freedom through effort, through ideals, through discipline, through submission to authority, political, religious, or psychological. But he said that true freedom has nothing to do with effort. It's not something you practice over time. It happens only when the mind is silent, when the noise of conditioning fades away. He challenged the entire structure of organized religion. He said that belief is an escape from fact. To believe in something, in God, heaven, karma, or salvation, is often just a way to avoid facing what is. Truth, for him, wasn't in temples or scriptures, but in the immediacy of perception. The moment you follow someone, he said, you cease to follow truth. That's why he rejected discipleship, authority, and rituals. He didn't want followers. He wanted people who could look, listen, and understand for themselves. Krishnamurti was also deeply critical of education. He saw that schools and universities were training people to become efficient machines, skilled in technology and competition, but empty inside. He envisioned an education that would awaken intelligence, not just accumulate knowledge. Intelligence, he said, is born of understanding the movement of thought and emotion, not memorizing facts. He established schools around the world, including in India, England, and the United States, where the focus was not only academic learning but also self-understanding. When you listen to Krishnamurti's talks, you feel his words cutting through illusion after illusion. He would often say, "The observer is the observed." This single sentence is perhaps the most profound doorway into his philosophy. When you look at fear, jealousy, or anger, and see that the one who observes it is not separate from what is observed, a shift happens. You stop struggling with yourself. You stop resisting. You see that the division itself was an illusion created by thought. And when division ends, peace begins. He also spoke about relationship, how every conflict we have with others mirrors the conflict within ourselves. We never actually meet another person, he said, because we meet them through the screen of our memories and expectations. You see your partner not as they are, but as you've built them in your mind. You love the image, not the person. To have a real relationship, you must end the image-making process. Only then can there be true love, love without attachment, possession, or dependency. Krishnamurti's love was not sentimental or emotional. It was something beyond the personal, a state of being where all division ends. Love, for him, was inseparable from freedom. You can't love if you're afraid, comparing, or clinging. You can't love if you're ambitious. The moment there's desire for reward or fear of loss, love dies. True love, he said, has no motive. It's like the light of the sun, it shines because it is its nature to shine. Throughout his life, Krishnamurti met scientists, monks, politicians, and philosophers, from the Dalai Lama to David Bohm, the quantum physicist. His dialogues with Bohm are legendary, exploring the limits of thought and the possibility of holistic perception. What made these conversations so powerful was that Krishnamurti wasn't arguing or debating. He was investigating, not to prove, but to understand. His approach to meditation was equally unique. For him, meditation wasn't a technique, not something you practice to achieve peace. If you're trying to meditate, he said, you've already missed the point. True meditation is the spontaneous flowering of awareness when the mind is quiet. It's not something you do, it happens when there's no effort, no control, no center-seeking experience. When thought ends, there is silence. And in that silence, the mind touches something beyond time, something sacred, infinite, and immeasurable. One of Krishnamurti's most striking qualities was his compassion, not in the sense of pity, but of deep understanding. He saw human suffering not as personal, but as universal. When you see suffering in yourself, he said, and observe it without escape, you are also seeing the suffering of humanity. That realization breaks the walls of individuality. You are no longer a separate meat fighting against the world. You are life itself, aware of its own conditioning, yearning to be free. As the years passed, Krishnamurti continued to travel and speak, not as a preacher, but as a friend. His audiences ranged from intellectuals to ordinary seekers, and yet his message never changed: observe, understand, and be free. He died in 1986 at the age of 90, but his words continue to echo in the minds of those searching for meaning beyond ideology. His philosophy is not meant to be memorized but lived. It invites you to look within and see that the battle between good and evil, peace and conflict, heaven and hell, all of it, begins inside the human mind. The revolution he called for was not in the streets, but in consciousness itself. In a world driven by noise, belief, and division, Krishnamurti's message feels even more urgent. He reminds us that freedom isn't granted by governments or religions, it's born the moment you see yourself as you are. And in that seeing, the self, with all its fears and desires, fades like a shadow at dawn. Freedom, he said, is not tomorrow. It is now, in this very moment of understanding.